Go ahead, Hillary.
And David, what's interesting is from those initial numbers, you do see that Mayor Pete Buttigieg has a strong start so far from that 62%, and his campaign is now reacting, saying that he did really well in rural Obama counties that went to Trump in 2016, and that is their message, that Mayor Pete Buttigieg is the most viable candidate to appeal to not only Democrats but also blue-collar Republicans, more moderate Republicans that are would consider voting for a Democrat in 2020. He can appeal across party lines. And so they're kind of pointing to this initial number as proof that they can appeal to both Democrats and moderate Republicans as well. David?
But, you know, the irony here is that two of those four people, Steve, the two people in the middle, Liz Warren and Bernie Sanders, are senators who've been in Washington covering this, this impeachment situation here. And yet they did better than Joe Biden, who had all that time in Iowa. Does that shock you?
It does. I mean, I think if you look at the Buttigieg numbers, again, assuming that they continue this way or that they're roughly what they are, I'd make two quick points. One, he was on the air, on television, longer and more aggressively in that final week than many other candidates. And Iowa still has a lot of older voters who watch a lot of television. Yes. So I think that helped him. Two, if you think back to 2008, when Barack Obama was a young, fresh-faced, new politician, Iowa catapulted him into the lead and eventually, of course, to become the Democratic nominee. I'm not suggesting that's going to happen here with Pete Buttigieg. Right. But there's a little hint of history here.
It seems like that there is something going on the Democratic side, not dissimilar to what happened on the Republican side, where there's this sort of anti-establishment sentiment. And as much as we can lament the fact that both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have been in government for a very long time, their policies are obviously sort of fringe and different than the establishment. Pete Buttigieg is somebody who's new to the table, and Joe Biden represents the old school establishment. And so this is a continuation of that theme that Americans are fed up with what's been going on with government for a long time.
Yeah, but giving too much time to Biden, and it actually might have ended up hurting him. And, you know, let's not discount the large percentage of undecided voters that actually may have dictated the fact that, you know what, we like Pete Buttigieg over the politicians.
Yeah, I mean, Bernie comes with tremendous baggage. And, you know, Steve, the fact that Pete Buttigieg was able to do so well in Iowa, which, you know, despite the fact that liberal caucus members, doesn't Iowa tend to skew, even among Democrats, a little more conservative when it comes to social issues? So is Pete Buttigieg kind of getting a little bit of that Obama magic this time around as that young, fresh face?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that's certainly how he portrayed himself to Iowa voters, was to say, I'm young, I'm new, I'm not the establishment. You might not know me, you might not be familiar with me, but that's a good thing when you look at my competitors.
Right. I'm just wondering, by the way, because of all the chaos with the caucuses, first of all, is Iowa going to lose its first place status as the first place where they have one of these things? And will the caucuses survive? Nevada is not going to use the same software, but still they're going to have something like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a staunch defender of the Iowa caucuses.
Why is that?
I like the process, mostly because I'm from Wisconsin and I'm a Midwest parochial kid. And so there's some of that.
That makes two of us. That makes two of us.
But look, on a serious note, I like the fact that Iowa gave the Midwest a prominent early voice when so much of our politics are driven by the coasts. And
you know, the irony of all this, though, is that it was Democrats more than anybody else who've been complaining about the electoral college system, which they say is too complex. You should have direct voting. Well, Iowa, they're getting even further away from direct voting than the Electoral College does.
Well, I've never been one to be for abolishing the Electoral College for just the same reason. Steve, being a Midwesterner, I think it's a great equalizer and needs to remain in place, because if not, the coast will dictate the direction of the nation and will totally silence the rest of the country. And I know that the framers thought of it that way. So
it's an indictment, though, of technology at the end of the day. They need to go back to doing the way the Cardinals elect the Pope, where they all sit around, they write something on a piece of paper, they pass the
white and the black smoke.
Yeah, the white and the black thing, and then you put the smoke up and you decide who the candidate is.
Perception is reality. And Bernie Sanders supporters are going to view this debacle as, you know what, another effort to undermine his campaign. They're going to look at it as, you know what, stop Bernie. When they hear quality control, that means to them, stop Bernie.
Oh, yeah, but you know what, though? Because it wasn't Joe Biden coming in ahead of him, they have, I think, less of an argument there. This is Mayor Pete. He's a total outsider. Yeah. He's not from the Beltway.
And he's not a socialist, which is going to serve him very well among any moderate Democrat who actually wants to get elected.
That is the headline of this story. Even though we only have 62% of the vote, and these numbers could change over the course of the next 24 hours, still, the big news is that Joe Biden came in fourth, at least with 62% of the vote in. A distant fourth at that. So that is big news, and Mayor Pete can, for the moment, claim victory, even though last night there were about 6 different Democrat candidates who were claiming victory. All right, we are going to continue to monitor any new developments coming out of Iowa. We're going to bring them to you throughout the hour as they come out. Thank you, Steve Hayes, for joining us. We really appreciate it.